Welcome to the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast, where excuses aren't tolerated and results are earned through authenticity, vulnerability, and a commitment to excellence. My name is Amber Fuhriman, success architect, attorney, and NLP trainer. If you're ready to bitch slap the bully in your brain, overcome the bullshit that holds you back, and design the life and success you've always wanted, then it's time for you to break your bullshit box and step into designing life and success on your terms. Asia, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm super excited to record with you.
What better way to start the day than by breaking some bullshit boxes? I cannot think of a single way that's better. So thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. And I do love, maybe that needs to be a morning routine I create, like just slamming some bullshit boxes in the morning. That sounds like
Oh,
it would be really
yeah.
cathartic.
Yeah, it does. Just get out some aggression immediately, and then you're good to go for the rest of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, they heard a little bit about you in the intro and your no bullshit approach to marketing, which, as you know, I love so much. But let's talk a little bit more about how you got where you are, because I don't know that I've ever talked to somebody that was like, when I grew up, I wanted to be a marketer. So, how did you find this space?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up that way either. So in 2014, like a decade and some ago, I started photography just as a hobby. I just always wanted to try it, so I was like, now's the time, just get the camera and do it. And I started posting my pictures, and then started people started asking me, Asia, how much do you charge? And I was like, oh, like light bulb moment, like, oh,
I
I could actually.
charge? Like, wait a
Right,
minute.
like I could do this as like a business. So I even fell into that, like entrepreneurship in general, pretty much completely by accident. I spent many years photographing a lot of different things, went through, senior photography, weddings, and I found my way to brand photography. And I loved that. I loved working with other entrepreneurs. But what I discovered pretty quickly was that even though these clients that were absolutely brilliant at what they did, they wanted these gorgeous photos to represent them and, their business and the quality of their work, most importantly. But when I asked them about their brand, they couldn't actually
Mm.
tell me what their brand was. So then I realized, okay, we need to reverse a little bit, start back at the beginning, and the brand strategy became a big part of what I did as a brand photographer in order to get them the photos they actually wanted and get them photos that were actually effective in terms of positioning their brand as a luxury brand. So after doing that for a few years, I started to realize that the brand strategy was actually the most important, or sorry, the most exciting part about the photography. So in 2020, I kind of phased out the photography and now I just focus on the brand strategy.
I love what you brought up about people not knowing what their brands are, because I think it's an identity that we don't talk about, right? When I
Mm.
do leadership based trainings for businesses, when we talk about this, I'm like, what are the values that you want your business to hold? And a lot of times they can't answer that. Or if they do, they're so surface level. So I think that's such a, just like as individuals, when sometimes it's easier to say what it is you don't want than it is to say what it is you want. I feel like when we start a business as a brand, it's the same thing. We don't create an identity that we can then make decisions within.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think especially for the type of clients that I work with, it's not necessarily even that they don't understand their identity. I mean, that might be part of it. I think the bigger part is that they're experts, right? And
Mm.
so it's a little contradictory, but because they're experts, they have all of this knowledge and experience, real life experience, working with clients experience. They have these methods that they've created, these different modalities that they pull from in order to deliver their service or their product. And so they have just this huge pool of stuff to pull from that makes them an expert. But it gets difficult when you have that big pool because it starts to all just feel bigger and bigger and bigger, and you don't feel like you want to necessarily be tied down to one thing. When I ask my clients, like, how do you help people? What do you do? They're like, Well, it's not just one thing. I help people in all of the ways, right? Like I'm so talented and skilled in all these different ways. Why would I limit myself to just focusing on one thing? And that's the part that they really get hung up with when it comes to branding is how do I translate all of that in a way that my ideal clients understand? And what I always tell them is it's not about making you choose one thing, right? We're not trying to put you into a box. We're not trying to put you into a bullshit box, right?
Yes.
The point is not to make you choose one thing. It's to figure out how all of the things work together in a way that mean one thing to your ideal client. Because if people don't understand how you can help them, how you're relevant to them and who they are and what they're struggling with and who they want to be, they're just simply not going to care. And it's not a personal thing. It's just that people are busy. They have their own stuff going on, right? We need to make it easy for them to understand how we can help them.
This is resonating so much for me specifically because I grew up in this super inclusive world, right? I wish that I was joking when I say when I got married, I had eight bridesmaids. Not because I wanted eight bridesmaids, but because if I asked this person, then I had to ask this person, and then I had to ask this person, and it's this inclusive environment, right? And I struggled with that when I opened my business for exactly what you're talking about. Who do you help? Well, I want to help everybody. So then you say I help everybody, which really means you help nobody. And I had this experience at a trade show recently where I asked somebody what it was they did, and they responded in a way that I know I've responded in the past, but I heard it for the first time, and it was like nails on a chalkboard because I asked them, I said, what is it that you do? And they started off, and I for those of you who are watching on video, I really hope they're watching your face right now. um I said, what do you do? And they say, well, I do a lot of things. And then they went in, and I immediately shut down because I thought, number one, either you don't know what you do, or you do so many things that I'm going to get bored before I'm done listening to your answer. And I heard it for the first time, and I was like, okay, well, there's a thing I'll never say again.
Right. Isn't that funny when we get some outside perspective and it's like, oh,
Yes.
I see how that is now. I see how that looks now. But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's so frustrating to me as a brand strategist, but also frustrating to the experts because it's like if I could just explain how good I am at this, if I could just explain why people should care, if I could just explain why people need what I have, the right people, not everybody, but the right people, then it would all work. But as they try to explain it, it's just like more and more and more word vomit. So if we can distill all of that down into a message that actually resonates with our ideal clients, makes sense to them, excites them, allures them, makes them see like, oh, she's talking about me. Like I have this problem. Maybe Amber is someone that I need to like get more serious about getting to know, or maybe I need to hire her or whatever it is. But we can't do that if we shut down like you did at that conference.
Yeah, absolutely. You said a word that I think is so important, and that's they understand my problem, right? But I think that as experts, we don't actually talk about the problem enough because we know so much. Like I can look at a client that I can coach and I can see the solutions. So we put the cart before the horse, right? I look at them and I'm like, I know that I can help you, and here are the solutions that I can provide. Yet the solutions aren't what they care about right now. They just want to know that I understand their problem, right? We go into problem solving mode. But at the stage of the game where we're talking about in this marketing and get to know you and pre hiring conversation, they don't care as much about the solution as much as they do that we are the person that understands their problem. And that's a super, super hard place for experts to go sometimes.
It is. And I think it really speaks to understanding your customer journey, not just in terms of like a sales funnel, but in terms of what's happening in here, like their actual psychological process, right? If I'm frustrated by a problem, I don't even want a solution. I just want to be, I just want to be understood that I'm frustrated, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and there's a big conversation happening right now about the ethics of pain point marketing. And I think it's an important conversation to have for sure. But to say that pain point marketing is inherently unethical, I just don't think that's true. It's nuanced, as everything is. But being able to communicate to your ideal clients that you understand what they're struggling with, and being able, even more than that, to have the logic to back up, here's why you're struggling like with this, here's the underlying issue, and therefore here's the solution. It's important to be able to communicate that. Otherwise, they're not going to care.
This is interesting because this is the first time I'm hearing this. Tell me more about
Oh.
the ethical conversation on pain point marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on this by any means. I've just been seeing a lot of conversations happening, and there's this idea right now that pinpoint marketing is inherently unethical because we are focusing on the negative. We're focusing
Mm,
on, like you're broke or you're sick or you're, whatever it is that's wrong, you feel ugly, or right, like
yeah.
however it is that these companies, sell us products, that by focusing on the negative, it's almost like a little bit of form of abuse, which I guess could kind of lead into coercion, right? It's like, oh, like look how bad you have it. And then once they feel really, really bad about it, then you come sweeping in the solution. And while I do agree that that's a shitty way to market, again, it's nuanced because you do have to talk about the problem.
Yeah, it's interesting for me, and this is why I asked for clarification because I wanted to make sure I understood what you meant. It's interesting for me because I live in that world, right? NLP often is called manipulation. And I
Mm.
often say that the difference between manipulation and influence is intention, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
give the example because my background is in criminal defense. I give the example that if my former clients were to show up with a crowbar and break into your car because you had locked your kid in the car and you couldn't get it out, they would be seen as a tool and they would be seen as a resource. If they instead broke into your car because they were going to steal it using the same crowbar, they would be seen as a criminal and it would be seen as a weapon, right? The crowbar didn't change. The person didn't change. The intention changed. And I think when we're looking at human behavior, people most often make decisions from a place of solving pain, right? So if we're not willing to talk about that pain, then how could we ever solve their problems? So I would be really interested to find out more. And I know you said you're not an expert on this, about the people that are leading that, because from a human behavior standpoint, I would mind read that they have some manipulation trauma in their past that they haven't dealt with, right? Because for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, if I have a tool and resource and I know that it can solve your problems, then all options for getting you to listen are on the table. Uh,
Yeah.
right? Like, if I'm not going to say what's going to cause you to listen to the product and solution is this, but I can't use that. Now, if my product, service, and solution won't help and I do that, then that's a problem. So it's an interesting conversation for me. And I think it all comes down to intention on whether or not you can actually solve a problem or whether you're selling something just to make money with no intention of a positive result on the back end, right?
Yes, I love that analogy of the crowbar. It's well, okay, first of all, I have so many tangents that my brain just like split off into. First of all, I would love it if you researched the pain point marketing is an ethical or unethical thing, and then please do an episode on it, like a solo episode on it, because I would love to hear that. I feel like not enough people are talking about, again, the nuances of it. So I would love it if you did that. And the second thing, as in terms of what you said about like the crowbar and it's just a tool, like yes, absolutely, this is how I feel about branding. There's so much bullshit in the branding industry, right? There is so much that we're taught that it is about manipulating perceptions until people see us how we want to be seen. This is how corporations brand their businesses. They pour millions, maybe even billions of dollars into manipulating perceptions. I that's a generalization, but for the most
Right.
part, there's a lot of really shitty corporations with really shitty business practices that build brands because they have the money to manipulate perceptions. But that doesn't mean that branding is inherently evil. Branding is just a tool, and like any tool, like the crowbar, it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. So it's our job as entrepreneurs, as entrepreneurs who want to be ethical, who have a desire to be ethical and to actually do good in the world and make an impact and have good intentions, like you said, to use the tool in the good way, right? Use it in the way that does allow us to have an impact without having the harm, that does allow us to make the profit without causing the harm.
Yeah. So this has been coming up a lot recently talking about branding. I was just talking to somebody at the dog park today about what I expect to be this Southwest Airlines implode as a result of the changes that they're making right now.
Ooh.
And one of the things that stood out to me the most, are you familiar with the changes? Have you heard about this?
I briefly, but I wouldn't mind
Okay.
a quick recap if you're willing to share.
So specifically over the last like 18 months and then over the last couple of months, big changes have been made. And the biggest changes have been like getting rid of open seating and then getting rid of their two checked bags for free policy. And I don't know why anybody else flies Southwest, right? Everybody that I talk to that flies Southwest flies because they like the open seating. They get to sit their family together. They get to choose where they want to be. And they also have these two free checked bags that they don't have to worry about what that cost is going to be. So what's interesting for me, going into the policies isn't the purpose of the statement. What's interesting to me is the way they've approached the conversation. When they announced these changes, they said, open seating and two free checked bags isn't our brand, isn't it? Right? And
hmm
I think we talked about this on the pre-interview call when we were chatting that your brand is what your customers say your brand is. Like you might have a different idea of what your brand is and what you want it to be, but your customers identify what your brand is. And I think if we were to poll 100 people, at least 99 of them would say that Southwest is two free checked bags and open seating. So it
Yeah.
raises this really interesting conversation of a company shifting how they want to show up in the market, but expecting people that signed up for one brand to follow them to this new brand identity that they have. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. When we're talking about business owners and entrepreneurs, I'd love your feedback on number one, when we realize that our brand isn't what we want it to be, how do we start to adjust that and what should we be prepared for in that conversation? And second of all, this idea that our customers really dictate what our brand is. And if our customers are telling us that our brand is something that we don't expect it to be, how do we start to listen to that and where does that all play in? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh my gosh, I would love to talk about that. Yes. So I'm actually going to start with the second one first because I think it makes more sense for the conversation. So yes, like you said, your brand is not what you think it is. It's not even really about you, which is kind of weird. I mean, like it sort of is, but it's not for you, right? It's for your ideal clients. So therefore, they dictate what it is. And that's it's kind of frustrating, right? Because it's like, well, what's the point of even building a brand then if it's completely out of my control? And it's really so much simpler than that, though. And this is where the brand strategy comes in, right? All we need to do is figure out how do we want people to feel? How do we want people to think of us? What is the experience that we want people to have when they interact with my brand, regardless of what that interaction is? So we have to start there. And then we back it up a little bit by saying, okay, well, what are the things that I need to do and say and share and the policies that I need to implement and the way I communicate? What do those things have to be in order to help people feel that way? It's not manipulation. It's literally just showing up and with integrity, genuinely doing and saying and sharing the things that make people feel how we want them to feel. That's it. And we do that all the time in life. We've been doing it since we first started, going to school and being social. It's like if you were like the mean girl, people are going to know you as the mean girl, right? If you are the weirdo, people are going to know you as the weirdo. And those are dictated. I mean, sometimes perceptions get skewed, right? But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, and especially as we mature into adults, we see through the bullshit and we think, oh, okay, like I'm having an amazing experience on this podcast right now with Amber. Amber's asking me great questions. She's listening. She's thoughtfully replying. I am having a good experience with Amber. I like Amber. She's a good podcast host, right? That's literally all it takes, unless you're completely bullshitting me right now, but I don't think that you are, right? So it's really so simple. It's just, again, doing and saying and sharing the things that make people feel the way we want them to feel, not in a manipulative way, just in a genuine way. And that works. It's a formula that works. Obviously, not everyone is going to like us, but our brands aren't for everyone, right? Our brands are for our ideal clients. So that's the second part of your question. And the first part in terms of, okay, well, we're at a point where we're pivoting or evolving or something is changing. How do we do that without pulling a Southwest and completely blindsiding people who have come to us for this one thing? And that was something that I was really concerned about when I pivoted from photography to brand strategy, because I had built this whole entire audience, this entire client base on the service of photography. But what I realized in my transition, and something that really helped me, not just personally, but also as a brand strategist, is I realized it was actually really easy to do that I because of how I built my brand. I didn't build a photography business. I built the Asia Dore brand. And the
Mm.
same people who liked the Asia Dore values, who liked the Asia Dore service, regardless of what the technical service was, they came with me, right? They supported me. I had clients who were in my audience for years as a photographer just because they felt connected to me, and they never hired me as a photographer. But when I transitioned into brand strategy, then I had a service that was relevant to them, and then they decided to work with me. So it's easier to do that when you start with the foundation. When you have a brand strategy that's really solid, it allows you to evolve, not just as a business owner, but also as a human, because you're building it on those really core foundational components, like your values, like your purpose, like your mission, like your personality, right? Those things that might change a little bit, but for the most part are such a core part of who you are as a person that it's naturally going to bleed into the business. So the solution to that is to build a brand that allows you to be clear, but also allows you to be flexible.
I love that. And there's so many things screaming at me right now. So I'm going to rein them in and make sense. I'm sure what I'm going to talk about will make sense. At least that's my hope. So um, I think there's so much from a human behavior standpoint. And I'll be completely transparent that this is something that I'm dealing with in my own business right now, because I moved from a industry in the legal industry to the personal development industry. There's zero crossover there, zero.
Right.
So I did need to find all new clientele and all new supporters. What was interesting for me, and this is something that I'm dealing with now, that is coming up for me, which I think is why your answer makes me so fucking uncomfortable. So like I'm literally squirming. No,
Oh no.
the level of authenticity and vulnerability and transparency that is required to build a coaching, training, and content creation business well is exactly the opposite of what's required to build a legal business well, right? And I tried to be open and authentic and vulnerable, and I was when I was comfortable, right? And I've experienced situations where people say they don't feel like they really know me, or people feel like they don't feel like I follow through on the relationship building part of building a training and coaching brand. And part of the reason for that is because my entire legal business didn't require that, right? It was transactional in the fact that you hired me for a reason, that reason was finished, and we're done. But when you get into human behavior, you're building lifelong connections with people. And for somebody like myself with um, abandonment trauma, lifelong connections are not something I'm used to building. And so this is something that for me, and I share this for a very specific reason, because I think what you just shared is so valuable. Yet, in order for us to do it, we have to face the things about ourselves that make us uncomfortable because those things go into who we are as a brand. The idea of calling my clients, which I know this is what it's going to take, the idea of calling my clients and say, hey, I'm working on my brand and I'm curious if you were to tell me 3 things that you think my brand is, what are they? That makes me want to throw up right now because I don't think I would like the answers, right? Because of the fact that relationship building has never been my forte. I can teach it and train it, but teaching it and training it doesn't require the vulnerability of doing it, right? And so this is a lifelong journey of human behavior. And I bring this up because this is where I think your and my services, brands, and messages intersect, which is in order to do what you just said, you have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to not like the answers that you're going to hear from people about what and who they think you are. Um, but I know the moment I make those calls is the moment everything shifts, right? So it's just a really interesting perspective to hear you say it because I knew the answer you were going to give logically. I didn't know that emotionally I was going to be like, God damn it, Amber, like, why do you have to ask the question, right? So I'm going to turn it back to you when we're in that situation where we're hearing things from clients that give us the idea that maybe our brand is not what we want it to be, or maybe we're not actually showing up in alignment with the brand that we say we want to build. What are some of the suggestions you have for overcoming the discomfort that comes along with the uncomfortable conversations that are required to solve that?
First of all, thank you for sharing your experience with that. It's nice to, not only talk about the theory, but also get some like real life examples. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I can totally see how going from the law, which is like super objective and, black and white, and this is how it is, to coaching, which needs to be a lot more flexible and flowy, just because you are working with other humans and other humans need that flexibility. That's like probably the most difficult transition one could do. So bravo for taking that
Thank
on.
you.
And yeah, I think that if you are getting feedback from people where you're like, oh no, is that how I'm coming across? Or like, that's not correct at all. Or, whatever it is that feels like there's some sort of communication barrier in some way. Obviously, that's a sign to do what you just suggested, which is like, okay, like, what's going on here, right? Like, let's figure out what's going on here. I will say the first thing is, just as a reminder, is that your brand isn't for everyone. So think about who you're getting feedback from, right? If I were to ask my dad about my brand, he's not gonna, I mean, he loves me and supports me, right? And respects what I do, but his answer is gonna be completely different than talking to someone who's actually my ideal client. So there's that aspect. But if you know for sure this is someone that maybe you've been connected with for a while and they're giving you feedback that is confusing to you, first of all, try to get as much information from them as you can about what that looks like, what they feel like. And I think it can also be hard because you are not a brand. You, me, an entrepreneur, we're not a brand. We are a human with a brand. So when we're building our brands, it's not like we're creating this separate entity that is like this completely refined and polished and perfect professional version of ourselves, right? It's just, I said it's not refined. It is a refined representation of us. It's the parts of us that are going to most benefit our ideal client. Because again, our brands aren't for us, right? So there can be this whole human underneath the brand that the ideal clients never see because it doesn't matter. They don't have to see all of us. That's not what this is about. Depending on how your relationships are with your clients, right? I want my clients to be my clients and I want my friends to be my friends because I think it allows me to be the best friend I can. It also allows
Mm-hmm.
me to serve my clients in the best way that I can. Obviously, there is some overlap when you're working person to person in a field like coaching or even brand strategy because it's human to human. But for the most part, we're here to do the business, right? We're here to get the shit done. We're here to solve your problem. Okay, that was kind of a tangent. So now
No, no, no.
I
I
have
love
to
it. It's
get
very
back.
relevant.
So if that were happening, to actually answer your question, to stop blabbering, I would start doing some self-discovery.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
self-discovery
That
is
self-discovery word.
so underrated when it comes to branding. Who am I? What do I want? Who do I want to
Mm-hmm.
be? What am I doing here? What is the change that I want to see in the world? What is my personality? Like I tell people when they're like first starting and they want to learn about branding, I'll give them the info about branding, but even more than that, I'm like, go like find out your human design type.
Mm-hmm.
Like sort through like your past shit,
Yeah.
right? Your trauma or whatever it is, like figure out why you are the way you are. Figure out how your environment has shaped you into who you are. Um, because those are the things that are going to make you not just allow you to create a more effective brand, but they're also going to help you be more confident in who you are, which is going to help you build a more effective brand because then you're not just crafting this separate entity. You're able to really take stock of what's going on in here and figure out how do we refine that and distill it into a brand that helps other people. So that's the first thing I would do is really just figure out who the hell you are or who the hell you want to
Yeah.
be and
I
start
love
there.
that so much. I love that so much. And that's, the world I live in. So I'm so glad that you said that answer. It's not what I expected you to say. And I love it. I think what's so interesting is when I'm working with people on this discovering who you are and what you want to be and what your past trauma is, like, because that is my world. Um, it is all too often figuring out how and when we're willing to take off the masks that we've put on throughout our life, then becoming somebody different, right? So I often have people ask me, like, can you help me understand what it is that I actually want? And my answer is always no, because you know what you want. I can help you understand why you won't allow yourself to acknowledge it or accept it, right?
Oh, I got
I've
goosebumps.
Oh, thank you. I've never met anybody who doesn't know what they want. I've only met people who convince themselves they don't know what they want because they don't think they deserve it or they don't think they can attain it or whatever the thing is that comes after that. But they always know what they want. And one of my favorite things to ask my clients, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, is whenever they tell me they don't know, I'll look at them and say, I know you don't know because you've never allowed yourself to know before. But let's assume for just a minute that you actually run your own life. What could it be? And they always have an answer, right?
Yeah.
Because they know, they just have never felt like it was okay to say because of the fact that we've been told to be humble our entire lives, or we've been told that we shouldn't brag, or that nobody wants to hear about our successes. And I bring this up because your job in branding and then in marketing is to talk about your successes. It is to talk about what makes you fucking amazing. It is to talk about why you are a better choice than anybody else in your industry, which is so contrary to every way that we've been raised. So, to that person that's listening to this saying self promotion is bad, I can't, like, I'm not the best in my industry because not because I don't think I'm the best, but because if I say I'm the best, then I'm critiquing other people and I can't say no to that. What advice do you have for them on how to start acknowledging their greatness of it is okay for me to say that I'm the best in my industry because I am?
Yeah, this is super common. It's like common with every single one of my clients. And it's also something that I have experienced multiple times in my business, right? Sometimes once a month, I wake up and I'm like, God, I suck. What am I doing? Does anyone even care? Right? It's totally normal. First of all, I'll just say that it's totally normal. Imposter syndrome is like a very real thing. I think especially when we are pivoting in business or offering something different or more specific or even, completely changing industries like you and I both did. It's like, who am I to do that? And so to protect ourselves, we downplay the stuff that not only we're really passionate about, but also that we know we're really good at. And we usually know we're really good at it, not because we just think we're good at it, but because we have actual evidence out in the world that we're good at it, right? We help our
Yeah.
clients get results. We share ideas that change perspectives and get people to go like, oh, I've never thought about it that way before. That's so helpful. Thank you so much. That's all valuable. And the thing that's frustrating about it, and what I would say to that person struggling with that, is that why would we downplay the thing that literally allows us to help other people? Because that's what you're doing. Branding is a humble free zone. If you're showing up and going like, oh yeah, I'm like kind of a brand strategist, and I like sort of do a lot of stuff and I like help people with their branding. It's like, just spit it out. You're missing opportunities to help people every time you do that. Every time you downplay your expertise, you're missing out on opportunities to help someone. This isn't about you. Your brand isn't about you. Your business isn't about you. Yes, we need those things to work for us. Yes, we need a business that fulfills us. Yes, we need a business that makes a profit, because that's the point of business. But at the end of the day, we're here to serve other people in whatever way that is, whether it's a product or a service or whatever. We're here to help other people. So every time you downplay your expertise, every time you diminish your skill set that you have worked so hard to build, with all of those years of gaining knowledge and experience and the thousands of dollars we put into education, whatever it is that has built up your skill set, and you diminish it, you're doing people a disservice, because they're either not understanding that you can help them, or they're not hearing about it at all because you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about yourself. So that is what I would say to other people, is stop being selfish.
I love it. Stop being selfish and talk about your shit, damn it.
Yes.
I love that. And the thing, if anybody takes like just one thing from this podcast, I hope the thing they hear is that branding is a humble free zone. That is such a powerful statement. I hate the word humble anyways. I did a podcast episode on this, and then I was just talking to my brother about it this weekend. So my attorney's going to come out for just a minute. I wanted to do a podcast episode about the importance of humility. And so I decided that in order for me to do a podcast episode about the importance of humility, I needed to understand what it meant. So I went to the dictionary and I looked up the definition of humble, and I was appalled. Have you ever looked up the definition of humble?
I don't know
Like,
that I have
I
actually.
read this and I was like, fuck that. Like, I ain't doing that. The definition of humble is to minimize or undermine one's own worth. And immediately my podcast episode changed from why humility is important to why being humble is bullshit. Um,
Yes.
and it became this conversation about, like, I still don't know what the word is to replace it. I haven't figured it out yet. And I think it's going to be different for every person. But I think there's this gratitude piece. There's this knowing that we have room to grow. There's this authenticity and transparency piece. But there's no humility, right? Like, not at any point in time do I want somebody to undermine who they are or what their value is around me. I also don't want them to be um, selfishly egotistical either, right? So there's this middle ground where knowing what we bring to the table, like, I'm a fucking good attorney. I'm also a great coach and a great trainer. And I know that and understand that. So somebody who is still dealing with their own self-worth is going to look at my statement and say, Jesus, Amber's egotistical. Whereas somebody who deals with their own shit and they know where they're at, they're going to look at it and say, I want to hire an attorney or a coach who knows they're the best, right? And I think that that's the difference that you were talking about between not everybody is supposed to be our clients, right? Not everybody is supposed to hear our message. And I refuse to diminish it for anybody. So I hope that whoever's listening to this podcast hears that it is okay for you to acknowledge how good you are at your job.
Yeah, I think the word that we're looking for between humility and egotistical is just neutral.
Mm,
These are the facts. I'm great at what I do. And that isn't subjective. Here's all of the proof that I have that I'm great at what I do. That's why logic is such an important part of brand strategy. You have to be able to back up with logic the shit you're saying, right? Here's my worldview. Here's my big idea, or as I call it, here's my brand philosophy. Here's the logic behind why you should give a shit about it, right? To have that logic is really powerful. So we're not going out and saying, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, and don't have the proof to back it up. We're just saying, hey, I'm good at this. Here's all the client testimonials that say that I'm good at this. Here's the literal book I wrote on the subject that proves that I'm good at this.
yes.
And here's why me being good at this is helpful for you, right? We always bring
Mm,
it back to our ideal clients. The other thing that I want to say is if you're struggling with like, oh, well, how do I say that I'm the best in my industry if I don't know if I'm really the best, right? Best is subjective. And so the goal with building a brand that really positions you as an expert is not to be the best at what you do, it's to be different enough that your ideal client sees you as the best at what you do. And it's that like, there are thousands of other brand strategists, there are thousands of other coaches, right? There are thousands of other attorneys, or maybe even millions of all of those. What we do is not the thing that sets us apart. It's how we do it. It's how we do it differently than everybody else. And it's knowing with logic how our way is better for our ideal client, not for
mm.
everybody, just for our ideal client.
I love that. And I'm thinking in a relationship context, because I'm newly reopened to the option of dating, which I question my life choices every single day. But, um, we've all seen those relationships where individually we look at these two people and we're like, my God, you're a hot mess. And yet together they are like the perfect compilation of hot mess that makes them make sense, right? And I was just having this conversation with my coach recently, actually in a group coaching call environment, was like, because we're so similar and I license her materials, I asked her, like, sometimes I struggle with marketing myself because why would people hire me when they can hire you? And she says, because I'm not the perfect coach for them. You are, right? Like, there's people that you are the perfect service provider for because of your personality meeting their personality. Does that mean that there's not somebody else that may have more knowledge in a different environment than you? Absolutely not. What it means is that for this person, you get their problem better than anybody else and you can solve it better than anybody else. So I love that reframe that you created and understanding that we have to keep our target market and our ideal client in mind.
It's true. That's also a conversation that comes up. Do you, in your coaching business, I'm sorry, do you work with entrepreneurs?
I do.
Okay, so you probably know the conversation of like, you need to raise your rates
Yes, all day.
in
It's one
some
of the
form,
first
right?
things.
And we're like, oh, well, like, I can't do that. Like, people are going to want the cheapest. And that's like, it's so not true at all. And I'm sure probably all of your clients, since they're working with you, they appreciate quality, they value quality, and therefore they want to pay for quality. If you see something that looks like too inexpensive for what it is, that's going to be a red flag for you, right?
Yeah.
You're willing to go with the quality, who you know is going to be quality, who you're connected with, whatever it is, the brand that you're drawn to, and at that point, price isn't going to necessarily matter. I, I mean, it does, again, nuanced, but you're more focused on, I need to work with Amber. Amber is the
Hmm.
coach for me. She's the one I'm going to work with. Like, oh, well, Asia is also a coach and she charges $1,000 less. Doesn't matter. I want to work with Amber. So
Yeah.
that's also a conversation in pricing.
And I think that it's important to understand where your ideal clients are, right? Because, I'm going to stay in the coaching industry for a minute because that's what I'm most familiar with. There are people who aren't ready for solutions yet. So, what they're doing is they're still looking for the quick fix that's going to come. And because they don't trust that they're going to follow through, they want the free or the 99 cent or the $27 offer, right? Um, I do have a $27 offer. However, it's only offered every now and then, and it's for brand awareness more than it is for client gathering, right? Um, we can be, and I'm going to throw this brand out there with zero disrespect, we can be the Timu of our industry, but Timu is not necessarily um, coexistent with quality, right? Nobody says I got the most quality shirt off Timu, right?
Sure.
So what we get to acknowledge, and I tell people this all the time, I am not the coach for everyone. I'm the coach who's ready to invest in solutions. Because how can I look at a client and say you need to own your worth and increase your prices if I am also not understanding my value, right? It just doesn't work. So I love that you brought that up. I want to circle back just a little bit because you've mentioned this a couple of times, and I want to make sure that we dig into it just a little bit. You've said you are not your brand, and we've talked about the identity of your brand versus the identity of you. But we're also in this world where every part of you is accessible in some way or another. The days of being able to dictate what the world knows about us are kind of gone. And people have kind of this morality expectation that they will, a large company or a large corporation can lose clients because a CEO does something that people believe is immoral or incorrect, right? So when we're in this space where we're building our brand, and we know that we are a huge part of our brand, although we have a separate identity. How do we balance those two of how much the world wants to know about us in order to connect with us versus how much they need to know about us to understand our brand? Does that make sense?
It does. And unfortunately, I don't have a really clear-cut answer. My answer is it depends,
Now you sound
which
like
is
an
like,
attorney.
I know it's like the worst kind of answer. But it's true because we're humans with brands. And since we're humans, we all are going to have different thresholds for how much to share or not share, how much to show or not show. Um, so the best thing you can do is experiment with it.
Mm,
What feels good to share? I mean, even vulnerability is on a spectrum. I think you can be really authentic without necessarily getting vulnerable. You can be relatable without being vulnerable. So if you feel like you have to be vulnerable in order to get people to relate to you, that might be a bullshit box that you need to
mm.
break, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it might be. And again, it's just going to take some experimenting. Okay, I'm going to share this thing that feels a little vulnerable. Here's why I'm sharing it, right? The intention is important. Like, for what purpose? How is this going to benefit someone hearing about this? And then what kind of feedback do you get? Are people like turned off by it or weirded out? Or is it completely neutral? Nobody gives a shit? Or are people like flooding your inbox being like, oh my God, thank you so much for sharing this. This is exactly what I'm experiencing right now. So you're allowed to experiment. You're allowed to experiment with your brand. Even a brand strategy needs to evolve because I said this before, but we're humans and we evolve, right? Our businesses evolve. So in terms of how do we balance that, it's really about experimentation, but it's also about having a solid brand strategy to begin with. If you sit down and figure out who am I? What am I doing here? Who am I trying to bring into my world? What is the point of any of this? How do I want to show up? What are my values that I'm going to share? And then how do I wrap all of that up into a message that I can communicate easily and confidently? It's a lot easier to know where your threshold is because you always just refer back to your brand strategy guideline, right? It's right all in there in black and white. Of course, it can be changed, it can be tweaked, it can evolve, but knowing your foundation is really helpful because it acts as a filter as you share things with the world. Like,
Yeah.
should I talk about that's like my grandpa died? Should I share that online? I don't know. What does your brand strategy guideline say? Does it align with your values? Who are your clients? Where are they at in their life? What are they experiencing? Obviously, you are still a human, so you can share stuff just to share stuff if you want. But I think from a branding perspective, it makes a lot more sense, both for you and for your audience, to be a little bit more strategic and intentional about the things that you're sharing. Does it have a purpose? Great, then share it.
Yeah.
Are you just sharing it because you feel like you have to be vulnerable? Maybe not.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it's really interesting to me because I've never actually thought about it from this perspective before. Because I share a lot of myself and my life online, and I share a lot in my training rooms. And the intention for that is because I am asking my clients to open up about their deepest and darkest insecurities, right? And I cannot ask them to do that without them feeling like I'm willing to do the same. And so when I started coaching, it became a if this is the world I'm going to go into, if I'm going to train human behavior, if I'm going to talk to people about the fact that your relationship with every aspect of your life between the ages of 0 and 7 dictates what you do as an adult, then I got to be willing to go there. And I don't think that I consciously took the time to acknowledge that I was going there intentionally because a lot of times it felt self serving, right? But
Yeah.
I think about it as you're talking about it. And, if I was in printer sales, then talking about my relationship with building long term commitment relationships or feeling like I'm not transactional might not make sense. When I'm
Mhm.
talking about sales communication and leadership, that is the exact thing that I need to be talking about, right? So I think this intention and the question that you had asked of like, what is it that I expect the person that's listening to this or reading this to take from this? What do I want them to get from this story? Kind of helps rein it in. So that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I got some, speaking of good advice, I got some great advice like when I very first started my business. And I am so sorry that I don't know where I heard it. I don't know where I read it. I don't know where it came from. But it was someone talking about writing like a newsletter for, if you have an email list and you're sending a letter. Um, it's that you need to be able to answer three questions, which is, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do?
Mm,
And if you can answer all of those questions, it's going to make any kind of content, not just writing an email, but any kind of content so much easier because it's going to give you an indication of like, well, I have this story, but I don't really know what I want them to know about it or do about it. So maybe don't share it, or maybe just share it as an experiment, right? But yeah, it's the intention that is really going to make a difference.
I love that. So just to repeat that, because I think this is an incredible place to start to wrap up. What do I want them to know? You said, what do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? Were those the three things?
Yes. Yes.
I
And
love
if
that. I
anyone's
think that
listening and is like, Asia, I told you that, then please let me know.
right. Reach out and let me know, right? Isn't that the weirdest thing? I was in a conversation with somebody and they were like, I think someone told me this and they gave a name. And I was like, I told you that, jackass. And they were like, oh, awesome. I knew I heard it from somewhere. But there's this thing that, like, once we say something, we kind of see it all around us. It's the way our brain works. It's called our reticular activating system. So, a lot of times, and if you're listening to this, you might experience this where you put something out into the world and then you think everybody's copied you, which in reality, it was there the whole time. You're not the trendsetter you think you are. I'm so sorry to break it to you. So oftentimes we share things and we're like, I told you that, but 15 other people might have said it too, right?
True.
So, with that being said, you have given so much incredible perspective on branding and some insight into who you are and what you've dealt with in building your brand and changing from photography to branding. If people want to dig into this idea of branding a little bit more, what resources do you have that they can reach out to you for?
I would absolutely love your listeners to join me. I have a master class that really just walks you through what you need in order to brand yourself as an expert. So, especially at the beginning of this conversation, when I was talking about, oh, you have all of these things that make you good at what you do, but how do you actually package that up and communicate it if that's the part that you're struggling with as an expert? That master class is going to be really helpful. Again, it's just I walk you through the 5 things that you need in order to really build a brand that positions you as an expert so that not only do you know you're brilliant at what you do, but your ideal clients also know and understand that you're brilliant at what you do. And the link to that is just asiadore.com/masterclass.
Perfect. We'll have that in the show notes just for people who are listening who might need a little bit more information to take action. What's the time for that masterclass and what can people be expected as far as a time investment so that they can make a decision?
Sure, it's just 30 minutes and it's just $7. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
super just simple. Get in, get out. Obviously learn something, learn a little bit about me and how I work and how I approach brand strategy. But yeah, just really to get an idea of like, I know I'm an expert. What do I do with that now? How do I present that to the world? That's going to be a really good choice.
I love that. And if they want to continue to follow up with you or reach out to you or follow you in any way, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Probably to sign up for the masterclass, if I'm being honest.
Perfect.
Most of my time is spent on my email list. I kind of am on social media, but I'm trying really hard not to be. So if they want to stay in touch, then joining my email list is probably the best way to do that right now.
I love that. Asia, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've absolutely loved this conversation and the perspective that you've given on branding and kind of the human behavior overlap. So thank you for spending time with me today.
This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me.